In this episode of the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast, we dive into the rules of business of Sam Walton, America's one time richest man and the founder of Walmart. Welcome, Wyatt, to another week.
Hi, Tanner. Thank you. I got to admit, when you proposed the idea of talking about Walmart, my first thought was like, why? It has nothing to do with our podcast, which is decentralized entrepreneurs and small businesses. And I was like, Walmart is like one of the biggest businesses. And you sent me the book, and I studied the book in my own Cliff Notes kind of way. Um, but then I got it. I figured out what you were talking about because it started out a decentralized opportunity and it grew into something that is taken over the world in terms of retail. So I've moved from skepticism to gaining and extracting value out of this podcast already. And we've just started. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like you said, people now just think of Walmart as the giant monolith that it is, but it was a startup and it was founded by a very ambitious founder who encapsulates honestly every bit of what we talk about in this podcast. And we'll dive into the depths of it over the course of going through his 10 rules of business. But he started focusing on small towns of sub 10,000 people because his wife would not let him live in a town greater than 10,000 people. And he made the most of it just serving customers in small communities and grew that in there. So, yeah, I'm really excited. This book completely, I'll show it on screen here. I got a copy for Christmas. It's been in my wish list for a while, and I devoured it, I think, in 2 days. I think it was December 26th or something like that I finished it. And I was like, Wyatt, we need to do this podcast. So it's been it's been amazing, and so much of his story I can kind of put in with my story because of course I started my first company was a retail business, and there's so many lessons that he did that I can kind of point back to in my journey of doing with, but also so many things that I wish that I would have known and maybe it would have saved me some trouble or made things a little bit more effective.
So where do you want to start? What's at the top of this discussion for Sam Walton?
At the end of the book, he gives his 10 rules, and he said it's not really intended to be the 10 commandments of business. They're just rules that worked for him. So I thought it would be neat to go through these rules, see what about it and his story that kind of resonates with today, but also perhaps, he built this business in the early 20th century. How many of those rules can still hold up? Too, because again, the Walmart of today is not the Walmart that he was running back in the 50s or the 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s.
Absolutely. That I can believe. All right. So it's 10 rules. The first one.
Rule 1, commit to your business. Believe in it more than anybody else. I think I overcame every single one of my personal shortcomings by sheer passion I brought to my work. I don't know if you were born with this kind of passion or if you can learn it, but I do know you need it. If you love your work, you'll be there every day trying to do it best that you possibly can. And pretty soon, everyone around you will catch the passion from you like a fever.
I love this one because it is absolutely something we've talked about. Outside of the Walmart story, this reminded me of when we did Founders U and Jason
Mhm.
Calcanis. He made a comment once, and I think it might have been a bit of an innocuous comment, but for some reason I pinpointed it out of everything. He said that when people are pitching their decks or pitching their business ideas, he can tell within 10 seconds if you're truly passionate about it. People are able to pick up on passion, and I think people underestimate passion. Passion isn't everything. You can't build a business off of pure passion, but it can really carry you far. And I think it can carry you further than a lot of people might take a business if you are truly in it every single day and just believe and are passionate in it. I love that about
Through his story, as an entrepreneur, you get his complete love and devotion to retailing and merchandising. There's so many stories in the book where he just went into literally every store he possibly could and studied it and studied it. He talked about at the end of the book how in his 52 years, I believe it was, of running Walmart and running the stores and through all of its different variations, that he didn't at one time think about merchandising. That's how committed he was to it. And like you said, you see this with different founders, and it's resonated through this book where there was a lot of people who got into it because discounting was the thing to do.
Mhm.
But in the book, it talks about how 76 of the 100 most or at the top of the discounting chain is not in existence at the time in 1992 when he wrote this. So over three quarters of the competition just faded away because they didn't have that sheer level of commitment. They were just getting into something that was neat and where they think they could make a buck. But because they weren't so devoted to it, because they weren't so serious about it, they had fatal missteps in so many cases. So
Mhm.
we see that all the time in the startup community, right? There's some new technology. Let's take AI right now, and everyone's just jumping on a bandwagon, but they're not really solving a problem that they're passionate about. They're like, oh, I can do X and maybe I'll get Y amount of users. Compared to so many of the founders we've talked about, they maybe have pivoted into using certain technologies, but it's of an underlying like mission and purpose for what they're actually passionate about and that they're in it for the long run.
Yeah, I think it takes a truly unique individual to build a successful business and company off of something they're not passionate about, something that they've identified. And you'll read this on any entrepreneur's blog or work from home blog or YouTube channel. It's about how to find new niches and using Google Trends to find out what's hot. And do you remember how many people started selling fidget spinners like 3 years ago?
Yep.
Do you honestly think they were passionate about fidget spinners? No, they saw a niche. They saw that there was a market suddenly, and they sold. And then what cracked me, okay, this is not probably very nice, but I did get a chuckle out of it. All of the stores, the second that trend died of fidget spinners, when the elementary kids stopped caring, there were boxes and boxes and shelves of leftover fidget spinners because it was such a trend. Um, this is something that I've tried to adopt in my professional attire. It was something I heard maybe in a movie once. It said, "Style is forever, but fashion's temporary." And I
Mhm.
always think of that. I'm not a fashion forward person when I dress, but I do like style. And I think it's the exact same thing with business. Is you can follow trends. You can go on Google Trends right now, and you'll find something that you might be able to throw something together, especially with AI, and sell and make a few bucks. You might even become pretty successful off of it. But trends die, and I love the concept of you find something that is just in your bones, and you think about it so much. It really makes a change.
And we see this, there's so many, like you're talking about, there's these get rich quick schemes. You can be drop shipping and you can be doing this, or one of the most desired things to be is like an influencer or social media personality. And no one's going to care about what you're saying if you don't care about it, nor are you going to enjoy making videos or content about those things in the long run. One reason we love this podcast so much is because we're obsessed with the topics that we talk about. I'm reading books about it, just saying we have to make content because we get so inspired. And
Hmm.
so that's really such a good point that you need to commit completely to what you're doing. And then through your passion, it's going to leach onto other people. And then
Hmm.
that's how it's going to grow off of it, right?
Absolutely.
Rule two, share
Hmm.
your profits with all your associates and treat them as partners. In turn, you will treat you as a partner, and together you will all perform beyond your wildest expectations. Remain a corporation and retain control if you like, but behave as a servant leader in a partnership. Encourage your associates to hold a stake in the company, offer discounted stock, and grant them stock for their retirement. Is the single best thing we ever did.
I love that. And I can absolutely, so I have to admit, this is probably one of the few points that I had problems with. This concept, I absolutely 100% truly believe in as you are building your company from the beginning stages to the middle stages and even going into going public. I think this becomes much more complicated when you become a corporation. Now, the servant leadership, that's a whole other discussion. I love the concept. I think the concept's great. The practice is hard. This is a powerful, powerful tool as you are building. And unless you are listening to this and you're running a corporation, in that case, you probably should be listening to us for advice. I think that's when it gets a little bit more nebulous, profit sharing and all that stuff. Wonderful. Of course, it's great. And I'm sure the employees appreciate it. But I think this is a powerful building tool for you as you gain employees.
I think that so many of the values he had have been lost because he
Mhm.
didn't get to share much of those pieces. Well, I should say his early stores of Walmart, he had the managers really invested. They actually brought in their personal money to help start the stores because he was bootstrapped the entire way, which is really crazy how much over leveraged he was and how much risk he took to get there. And it was really going to IPO was a necessity for funding and to keeping it at scale. But so much of the profit sharing and all those pieces happened when they were a public company. And it was those employees who stuck with him. And then over time, those stocks would double and double and then increased in value. And they would get their retirements or they could buy their home or put their kids through college. And all of those things really bred a commitment to the company that we don't see anymore. Maybe you do, like you're talking about in these early stages, startup companies, but there's a little bit different motivation there because the motivation of the startup is to get it to an exit so you can
Hmm.
cash out. The way they did it, and I don't know, I'm a little bit wistful for yearning for those pieces. It was about some form of like a retirement in those sense or an investment for the long term because you were loyal to the company and in turn were loyal to you. And so I'd be curious. I don't know how well it scales anymore in
Right.
terms of those large companies, and that's kind of sad. Investing in your people, that was something that throughout the book you just saw, and there was times where he failed. There's a really interesting story where he had one of the leaders who he let run the company for some period. He thought, heck, I'm in my 50s, we're doing so well, I'm going to step away and retire, and he just couldn't do from it. And so that led to a crazy story within the book that people should definitely check out, where they lost a bunch of their senior leadership and management and all those pieces due to dividing the lines. The whole time he was focused not only on his customers, which is a huge theme throughout, but also the frontline people and the stories that were told in there. And it's a really neat way that they write the book too, because it's not just his words; it's different paragraphs and examples from people within his life, from different leaders of the company's family members as well as associates. So it really painted a good understanding of the way they used to be. And I used to work for Walmart back in the early 2000s, and it didn't have that ethos. And
Yeah.
again, that's something that I miss the idea of.
So funny story. I also worked for Walmart, and knowing that we're both from a cook, we probably both worked there probably around similar times, which is hilarious. And that's the only reason I brought up my objection is
Mhm.
I didn't see that in the Walmart I worked for, and it's nothing against the people who ran it or worked there. It's not that. As corporations grow larger and more complex, some of that stuff falls to the wayside. Probably has to fall to the wayside, honestly, for financial reasons. I truly believe it can be a powerful building block to get you moving through those stages of your company's growth. Um, Something that maybe I'll push for a future episode. It reminded me of, I don't want to digress from Sam Walton, but a book I just finished on the origin story of Honest Tea,
Mhm.
the brand. Something you said there really, something I really took from that book was the concept that you should build a business for life. You shouldn't, exactly as you said, startups, you shouldn't build a business for an exit. You shouldn't build a business because you intend to sell it to Google in 18 months for $100 million or whatever the situation may be. And of course, if it happens, it happens. But if you build a business for life, very much what Sam Walton did, he didn't start Walmart to sell it to Target or whatever. He built it for life and his family. And by doing so, by building something for life, even if eventually you do get out of it, what happens is the mind shift changes in your head. You're willing to go the extra mile and do the extra work and put in those hours sometimes to keep it going, to sacrifice your paychecks so that you can pay your employees and all of these things that Sam Walton also did. I love the concept, and that's probably one of my biggest takeaways from this entire book was he built this for a family business. And not only did he build it to give his family wealth, which he was very successful at, his family worked in it every
Mhm.
single day. They didn't have a dinner together where they weren't talking business. And um, I thought about it when I was reading through this part, and I was like, man, that makes a lot of sense because one of my big hesitations in starting my own venture is the time it'll take away from my family. And I was like, bam, easy solution. You guys got jobs now, right?
Well, that's the thing. It was his life was consumed by Walmart, but his family was too.
Mhm.
And so he had the kids working when they were 5 years old, and they were very open with the finances, and he gave them stock in the company very early, which I was listening on one podcast talking about that. And he was like, well, that's a unique way of getting past inheritance taxes when they're already owners, when the company's worth nothing.
Yep.
So they worked out pretty well for them. It's dinner time conversation as the stores. It's every piece of it is that. And so rather than separating it and making a dual life, in many ways, if you're going to be so committed to this thing, bring in the family, bring in all the people that you care about, and then you can all have that common mission.
Mhm.
So I guess that goes into this next little part, which is rule number 3, which is motivate your partners. Money and ownership alone aren't enough. Constantly, day by day, think of new and more interesting ways to motivate and challenge your partners. Set high goals, encourage competition, and keep score. Make bets with outrageous payoffs. If things get stale, cross pollinate. Have managers switch jobs with one another to stay challenged. Keep everyone guessing as what your next trick will be, and don't become too predictable.
I love the cross pollinating of this statement. It's something that I've used in my career a lot. Not for me in particular, but in it's a tool I've used in lots of companies. It lists all of your employees on one side and it lists all of the jobs on the top. And the competition is to see who can get trained in all of the jobs first. And I'm not talking about taking someone who is a cashier and teaching them how to be your CTO. That's not rational. But honest jobs within the store, within the company, within the manufacturing floor, wherever it is, cross training. And the value is the flexibility you gain in moving people around and having them know multiple different aspects of the business is invaluable, because no longer is a heavy sick day going to completely tank your business, because you can shift employees around because they're skilled in this and they understand and they're invested in it. They say, oh, I'm typically doing a cashier, but you know what? Today I'm going to go in the back and I'm going to go stock. And Walmart absolutely still does that to this day. And that's something I remember from when I worked at Walmart a lifetime ago. Is It's kind of like in the army, everyone's a rifleman,
Mm-hmm.
everyone's a cashier. Everyone can be a stock boy. Everyone can unload a truck. And I loved that versatility because it made them way more flexible and able to adapt to changing situations.
Well, the whole focus was giving customers the best price and the best experience every time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so everyone in the company was there to serve that purpose. And one thing that I really love and resonate with Sam Walton was his hate for bureaucracy, and how, of course, at scale it becomes a byproduct, but he was always trying to find ways of eliminating those things. And every time he'd visit a store, which he did constantly, he just was always visiting the stores and on the ground and gathering information, was seeing how he can make things more efficient. And so much of the time now, what we see in the corporate world is there's a couple pieces that are missing. Back then, you worked your way up from stock boy to potentially CEO.
Mm-hmm.
I know Walmart has those stories of people who started in the low and then worked their way up to the high leadership. But the people that they bring into a lot of companies now are just like professional C-suite people, just
Sure.
professional managers, professional leaders. They're coming in with high level concepts, but they've never really done the work, and they don't have that understanding of, again, that true mission of serving the customer and what we do and all of those pieces. And so you get people who are just siloed in their own ideas and their own thing. I love the idea of just flipping thing around. It was, okay, oh yeah, you're a VP here, but you're gonna have to make some calls, or you're gonna have to help in these pieces, or it's time to set up a new store. So get busy unloading boxes and all those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
That's a concept that, again, when they were starting, they were so poor and they were so bootstrapped through all of it that everyone had to do everything. And so from that, then they just were always refining to making it better and better for the customer. And at one point in the book, there was a story that they talked about. It was another CEO who mentioned if you talk to Sam Walton and ask how his company was doing, he would be like, oh, the lines are too long. We're not helping the customers well enough. This isn't right. And then if you go talk to a CEO of one of the other retail stores of a different brand who may be on the brink of failure, they'll just talk about how great everything is. And they'll just ride that high all the way until their company closes. And that
Mm-hmm.
was something I respected so much about Sam Walton, that no matter how big he got, He really was in the trenches with the people, lockstep and arm. And then again, just really finding ways to motivate them and do fun things. It talks about his competition around moon pies and how he became like the moon pie king, and just all of these neat things that, again, just make the company that much more special. And then there is part, and it's gone now, I believe. I know. Did you ever have to do the Walmart morning chants? Was that still?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's something, again, that seems so lost in time, that archaic thing. But there is something about moving your body and screaming and being with people and getting yourself in the right mindset that, again, is super motivating to executing on your mission.
Just caveat to that conversation. Have you had a moon pie anytime in the last like 20 years?
I did like 2 years ago, and I ate maybe like 3 bites. They are
It's
insanely
disgusting.
rich, insanely rich.
I think I got a banana one, which might have been my downfall. It
Mhm.
was never. So okay. Anyways,
Yeah, you
so
gotta go with chocolate.
yeah,
I'm not
right.
even that big of a chocolate person, but I don't see how banana moon pies would be that good.
No.
We'll probably get some shade for that comment.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Number
Four.
four.
Communicate everything you possibly can to your partners. The more they know, the more they'll understand. The more they understand, the more they'll care. Once they care, there's no stopping them. If you don't trust your associates to know what's going on, they'll know you don't really consider them partners. Information is power, and the gain you get from empowering your associates more than offsets the risks of informing your competitors.
This one feels like a no-brainer, but it's missing from so many corporate environments today. I'm speaking to you, Tanner, but I'm also speaking to people who listen to this podcast. Think about a time when you worked for a company and you were blindsided by something, a decision. Maybe they sold, maybe they got a new CEO, maybe they made a drastic left turn from something that you thought was their natural path, and how kind of abrupt and disruptive it was to your flow and work. And did you feel like you were part of the company then? No, you felt like you were just a cog in that wheel. And well, the decision's been made, and now I'm just rolling in this new direction. It's not a pleasant place to be, and it's really disruptive. I can think of so many jobs and so many situations where decisions were made behind closed doors. And I'm not saying ask everyone their opinion, but I'm saying transparency. If during these situations at these companies they had a town hall meeting or something like that, and before the decision was made, said, "Hey, we're thinking of this, and we'd love some perspective. If you have some time, stop by my office." I would have felt like a valued member just to say, "Hey, they're telling me beforehand." That's rare to find these days.
There's no real secret sauce to business. Like, even like the food formulas and all this stuff, like they can figure it out and copy it. So the fact that you have to be guarded with your processes from so many people doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
Again, the more you can enable and the more that you can leverage your people and the more information they have, the more they can help you problem solve and grow with the company is such a huge thing. And we see this in startups too, where everyone's always like, oh, they're going to take my idea and all this stuff. And it's like, the idea means nothing. It's all about the execution. So there's nothing, stopping anybody from doing what you're doing. So don't worry about like arming your employees because they're not going to just leave necessarily and then go to your competitors. I mean, to some degree, I know Apple's having that big lawsuit on their blood oxygen monitor and all those other pieces, but for the most part, you're not going to get copied in that way.
Mhm.
Rule number 5: appreciate everything your associates do for the business. A paycheck and stock options will buy one kind of loyalty, but all of us like to be told how much somebody appreciates what we do for them. We like to hear it often, and especially when we have done something we're really proud of. Nothing else can quite substitute for a well-chosen, well-timed, sincere words of praise. They're absolutely free and worth a fortune.
Yeah. I can't honestly think of a single reason someone wouldn't appreciate well-earned praise. I think it's a built-in human trait to seek praise. And I'm not talking pandering and getting upset when someone doesn't praise you, but when someone does and you genuinely feel like you earned it, you're on cloud nine. I mean, sure, money's great. We all love money, and I know that's why everyone has jobs. I'm not oblivious to the fact. But isn't it cool if you make a paycheck plus you're respected for what you do? That's a win-win.
Yeah, we all like to get recognition before we're
Hmm.
status creatures, right?
Yeah.
So just the ability to make people feel validated and feel rewarded and feel seen for the work that they do is just going to encourage those more pieces.
I can speak for myself. Any time during my job, if someone just pulled me aside with no ulterior motives, no caveat conversations, and just said, "Hey, Wyatt, I just wanted to say you did a really good job in that presentation or whatever," I'd be like, I would be shocked because it's not something you receive very often anymore. And when you do receive it, it should be special, but it shouldn't be so special that you're blown away and think that they have an ulterior motive.
Right. And that's the thing anymore in the business world. I'm sad to see everyone's just so self-involved that you
Mhm.
don't really have people going externally to really help complement in those pieces.
Yeah.
And there's certain expectations if someone's like a manager and their team member, and there's like, "Yay, hooray!" and you do things, but it's missing that sincerity piece of it. It's missing that real feeling of recognition. It's more of a, "Oh, this triggered, so of course, yay, thumbs up on Teams, send a GIF, do something like that." It's missing the real appreciation part, and that's the thing about the rule that, again, I feel is missing so much of the time because people are viewed as resources and not really as valued members. And through Sam Walton's story, again, because he was so in the front lines, visiting every store, talking with every person, he would sit in the break rooms at 4 in the morning with a box of donuts just to lure in the truck drivers so he could get every piece of information he could because no one touched the stores more than the truck drivers. So he could
Mhm.
get every nuance from them as possible. So he appreciated every level and really valued every level of that organization and took all that information to make it better. And that's something that is so missing now. And that's something that I'm really taking to heart because the curiosity part of it, but ultimately really listening part of it is key. But then the one step further and recognizing and appreciating the people who are with you, I think that's the ultimate part of it.
So next one, celebrate your success.
Yes. Find some humor in your failures. Don't take yourself so seriously. Loosen up, and everyone around you will loosen up. Have fun. Show enthusiasm, always. When it fails, put on a costume and sing a silly song. Then make everyone else sing with you. Don't do a hula on Wall Street. It's been done. Think up your own stunt. All of this is important and more fun than you think. And it really fools the competition. Why should we take all those cornballs at Walmart seriously?
I love this concept, and I think the moral of the story is a lot of these Sam Walton isms. That's a word. Um, have been lost in modern day business. I mean, celebrate your success, and I'm not just talking hitting your KPIs or, oh, we got an extra bonus this year. Successes in business are a direct result of successes in your employees. And if your employees aren't getting that trickle down success, whether it's in monetary or dressing up, and having a, and I'm, for the love of God, stop giving people pizza parties. Um, Finding a genuine way to say, hey, as a company, we were successful and that's because of you. And if you can find a genuine way to do that, you're going to endear those people and want them to succeed the next year or the next quarter as well. And the same, um, you can't, while you should attach your success to your employees and their hard work, you can't attach your failures to your employees because they are not going to take it like you. They are not going to say, "Oh well, shucks, we'll get them in Q4." Um, that it doesn't work both ways. They want to share in your successes, and they want to understand and be part of the failures. They want to understand what they do or what happened, but they want to understand it so that they can get better themselves and say, "Oh, we missed the mark this year in Q4. We had so much extra overtime because blah blah whatever the situation is." They don't want to repeat that. They want to be successful too, your employees. So sharing your successes, and I love the concept of making fun of your failures. I this is something I've never considered, but I could think of so many times in my professional career where I've had a failure or a company I've been with has had a major failure, and sometimes it causes just a giant shit show. Um, how amazing would it have been if the CEO came out dressed like a chicken one day and be like, yo, we dropped the ball and missed Q4 projections by 30%. And, the board's screaming at me, but let's do the chicken dance. I would have thought he was ridiculous, but I would remember it.
In the book, they always have these high level things that they're trying to accomplish, and they do bets on it. Like, oh, I bet you can't do that, or I bet we can. And then there'll be inevitably some manager of leadership doing something completely embarrassing, hence the hula on Wall Street.
Mhm.
What I really get from this rule, honestly, is the have fun. I have been thinking about this a lot lately because there's so much happening right now. I have kind of forgotten in many ways to have fun with whatever I'm doing. I've been taking everything so seriously. And again, the line, don't take yourself so seriously, really resonates because you want to do an exceptional job with everything, whether it's the podcast or some of these side things or the main job or your family or all these things. There feels like oftentimes there's so many high stakes to it that failure is not an option. You don't enjoy the process as much. And it just becomes another thing to check off your list. Realizing that work should be fun. And that's probably another concept a bit lost in time, perhaps.
Sure.
But it really should be fun in many ways. It surely should be part of your life, and your life should be entertaining. It shouldn't be miserable. You should be wanting to live days that are exciting, and when you end them, you look back on them with positive things. So much of like what I've been dealing with lately has been, if you get a win, well, that's the way it should have been. And if you
Mm.
fail, then of course it's your fault. And so taking the time to really understand your accomplishments, celebrate your successes, but then realize, okay, failing's not scary. It can actually be kind of funny. Like, I did something stupid, or that happened like not the way I thought it, but it turned out into another way. And then just be lighthearted with everything on the part of it. So I don't know, that honestly, probably of all the rules, this one kind of hits me the most, at least this point in time right now.
I love it. That's a good way to attribute it.
Rule 7: listen to everyone in your company and figure out ways to get them talking. The folks on the front lines are the ones who actually talk to the customer, are the only ones who really know what's going on out there. You'd better find out what they know. This really is what total quality is all about: to push responsibility down in your organization and to force good ideas to bubble up within it. You must listen to what your associates are trying to tell you.
I think we've talked about this before. I do this in my job every day. I listen to the senior executives and the directors and even some of the managers enough to not get fired. And then I do everything in my power to ignore them because I am trying to find solutions to business problems. And never once has a director of a company provided me an excellent business solution. Sorry if you're a director. I say that because as a director or a VP or a senior VP or C suite level, it's not necessarily your job to understand how the business works. And I know this is a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. You're telling me the CEO doesn't know how the business works? I'm telling you the CEO doesn't know how the line people do their job. And the people who can directly impact your customer, your product, are those bottom, those bottom tier employees, those people who come in every day and work their butts off and don't have an office or anything like that. Those are the people I always go to first. They solve the problems. They have the best ideas. They are not shy about telling you where the problems lie. And I'm not saying that being a director or C-suite is worthless. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you don't have the solutions your employees do. And it has been true every single company I've ever gone.
100%. And then to put it in the context of, well, for startup, so many times startups are always like, oh, we have to talk to the customer. We have to talk to the customer. And they actually get kind of blind to the people within their teams. Because
Yeah.
one big thing right now is hiring on potentially a lot of freelancers and consultants and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not honestly working with them so in depth as well, you're not going to understand all of the things that are needed to totally build your product or build your business. So again, it's complete understanding. So it's not just listening to some people, it's listening to every aspect, listening to your customers, listening to your suppliers, listening to
Mm-hmm.
your partners, listening to your employees, and the whole aspect. And Sam Walton, through the whole book, that's his whole thing. He's always got his little tape recorder, he's got his yellow notebook, and he's extracting as much information as he can from everybody so he can cherry pick the best ideas and implement and try them out. And if they don't work, well, that's okay. You could just throw them out. And there's so many times in the book he talks about, trying things didn't work and then going there. There's a great story about opening his first Walmart, and there's like watermelons and donkeys, and it's 115 degrees out, and the watermelons start exploding, and donkeys do what they do, and all that gets tracked through the stores, and it's just chaos. But you know what he
Mhm.
found from it? And this goes back to the prior rule of finding the good and the humor in it. He's like, well, if people are going to slog through all that and still buy stuff, I think we're on to something with these pricing. So.
I love that perspective. I think having that kind of perspective is great. I can't recall where I heard this once, but everyone's heard the phrase under promise, over deliver.
Mhm.
Man, as a consultant, that's like my mission statement. But I heard somewhere once, and I've always remembered this phrase, and I haven't figured it out for myself. But the phrase is over promise and then over deliver. And I feel that was Sam Walton's goal. Is
Mhm.
he didn't under promise anything. He gave you the whole shebang. We're going to have a discount store. It's going to be fast. We're going to have such a wide variety of products. It's going to blow your mind, and it's going to be cheaper than anywhere else you can get. He over promised, and then he over delivered with customer service and listening and truly taking comments and improving things. And I love that concept. And you can start seeing the building blocks of such a unique business mind and how he went from running a Ben Franklin, which is funny because we used to have a Ben Franklin in McCook. I remember very fondly how he like managed a Ben Franklin to being, like you said, at one time the richest man in the war or the country, and still to this day, every single person, whether you shop at Walmart or not, knows who Sam Walton is. And you can just see these small building blocks of such a unique way of thinking and doing business. Um, I love it. I became a Sam Walton fan vicariously through you giving me this assignment.
So that leads us right into rule 8. Exceed your customers'
Sorry,
expectations.
I jumped ahead.
No, you're perfect. Perfect segue. If you do, they'll come back over and over. Give them what they want and a little more. Let them know you appreciate them. Make good on all your mistakes and don't make excuses. Apologize. Stand behind everything you do. The two most important words I ever wrote on the first Walmart sign was satisfaction guaranteed. They're still up there and they still make all the difference.
I love the concept about apologizing. One of the most fun jobs I ever had in my life was I ran customer service for a casino, and my God, what a crazy job! But part of it was making up for when customers didn't have a good time, and as you can imagine, there's lots of customers at casinos who don't have a good time. Our kind of rule of thumb and how to proceed with this was it doesn't matter the situation. If they came here and lost all their money because they suck at gambling, we're still going to make it right. And the customer service was top notch. In a town of 40 casinos, we were the number one casino because it didn't matter what happened to you. We're going to make it right. We're going to own it. And we're going to make sure that your experience is better. And Sam Walton built this into his company. And satisfaction guaranteed. It's like a story I tell a lot of people once. I think it's a nice clothing boutique. I can't recall off the top of my head which one it is, but the story goes that they were obsessed with customer service, and I'll think of the store name here in a minute. The story is that one day an old lady showed up into the store with a tire from her car and said, "I would like to return this." And it was a clothing store, and they're like, "Man," the associate was like, "Ma'am, we don't sell tires." This, for some reason, this old lady was just adamant about giving back this tire and getting a refund for this tire. So the manager comes and the manager freaking returned the tire. They don't even sell tires, but that's customer service. That's amazing, going to the next level. And I swear by the end of this episode, I'll remember the store name. But Sam Walton did this, and that satisfaction guarantee, a lot of people, when they're building a product, whatever that may be, are terrified of those guaranteed, 110% money back or 100% money back. People are terrified of this concept. And I guarantee you, most people will never return a product. Even if it's a physical product, I can't think of the amount of things I have lying around my house that I intended to return and never did, let alone digital products and all that stuff. But people are afraid of guarantees when they're starting a business. And I promise you, an over the top, unheard of guarantee is going to set you apart from your competition, and it's going to endear you to your customers. If I think the most I've ever heard was 150% money back guarantee. Insane. Who would think that I'm going to lose money if people return a product? Um, and they were wildly successful. Over the top guarantees make customers feel comfortable.
The other part to add to this too, I love what you were saying with all of that. Agree 110% or 150%, should I say. Sam Walton had the right mission, and the mission was their customers. And the mission, the two pieces of that was satisfaction guaranteed and the everyday low price. They would
Mhm.
always have the best price. And by sticking to those core things, which was the focus of the customer and realizing it's the customer that made them, and that's their success is built off of these people coming back to the stores to spend their hard earned money. That's what made them successful in the long run. And so every decision that they made was off of those things. Will this give a better price to the customer, and are they going to be satisfied with their experience coming in and shopping with us? And from that they made such a great company at the time. And that's the thing. And again, a bit of that's lost. I don't see satisfaction guaranteed on the Walmart in my town anymore. I know you can still return stuff, but it's a little bit different. It feels like I don't even know the last time I've returned anything to Walmart.
Mhm.
It's focusing on the core of your business. And the other part of it too is it's so easy when you're in a company to be focused inward. It's all about us and our processes and our things and our bottom line and all this other stuff. And it gets really hard to be focused outward. And that is your customers. When I was in retail, like you were saying, it's hard to take returns because maybe it was a big sale and it's a slow day. And then you have to go negative in the cash register because someone didn't like a video game. Again, at the end of the day, if you have someone who has trust in you, a good, consistent experience with you, in the long run, you're going to be making out way better than the small things. And that kind of also goes to the piece we talked about before. We're kind of focusing on the long game rather than the short.
Well, and another concept that came from this book that Sam Walton really pioneered was he did stuff that his his peers in other companies thought he was insane for. He offered customers more products at cheaper prices. Like, this wasn't just discount, this was more. If I think the example in the book was like one of his early stores, the reason Ben Franklin, it was the Ben Franklin story actually. He took a random Ben Franklin store and made it the most successful in the region or something like that in
Mm-hmm.
like 2 years. And one of the examples of what he did to do that was, it was like women's underwear. I think it was selling
Mm-hmm.
women's underwear. He said, instead of selling one pair for 50 cents, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sell 6 pairs for $2 or whatever those numbers were. So he gave customers more and for less money. And the people who were running other Ben Franklin stores thought he was insane. His person he reported to through the Ben Franklin chain of whatever thought he was insane, but they were given the leeway to do it. And in 2 years, he was the most successful store in their area. I love it. People and customers, especially, are attracted to unique businesses that will make the customers' lives easier. You're going to save me money and give me more product. It doesn't get better than that. So obviously, they're going to take their business there instead of the competitor.
Rule number 9: control your expenses better than your competition.
Mm-hmm.
This is where you can always find the competitive advantage. For 25 years running, long before Walmart was known as the nation's largest retailer, we ranked number 1 in our industry for the lowest ratio of expenses to sales. You can make a lot of different mistakes and still recover if you run an efficient operation, or you can be brilliant and still go out of business if you're too inefficient.
It's the entire reason I have a job today. Companies want to cut operating costs, and it's not just about cutting employees and nonsense like a lot of people think. Um, if you can produce the exact same widget for 1% less than you did yesterday, that compounds. And suddenly the profit margin increases, and you're making more money because you're doing things faster. You're making them with better quality, fewer customer returns. And that small, insy teensy, tiny improvement just continues to compound and continuously improves, and only gets better. The only reason I have a job is because tiny improvements make massive differences when you push them out the back end of a large company. Absolutely.
I think also that this concept is really kind of came up because of his situation of being in small towns.
Hmm.
So many times when you're in a small rural community, you can't make a lot of mistakes and you don't have a lot of resources. So you have to do as much with what you have as possible. So you have to be lean, you have to be efficient, you have to find the best deals because there's not so many people around that you can just be kind of inefficient in those places and just the population will pick up the slack. It's
Yep.
like, no, I'm only going to get X amount of product. I need to sell all of it. So how can I move it and build that best amount of strategy? And so you had all these big companies off in major metro areas, all these other discount retailers, and they didn't have the same limitations that Sam did being in towns of 6,000 people.
Mhm.
And so he really had to make it everything as lean and efficient and on razor's edge as possible, and that just made them better and better as they scaled because there was something like Annie talked about here where they had the lowest amount of costs compared to those pieces. So if there was ever a change in the market, they had more cushion to eat it.
Mhm.
And so they could sell the same product for the same price and actually make money while some of their competition might be actually losing money. And then the other part of it that, man, I love about this book is he really hated, even though he was the richest man in America, he did not live that life.
Mhm.
There's stories. He's like, why am I being invited to Elizabeth Taylor's birthday party? I got picked up in a limousine that could seat 14 people. Why the heck would I want a car that could seat 14 people? And all of these other like managers and leaders of these other companies were living the high life and driving their Rolls Royces and all those things. And Sam was driving the same pickup truck because that's what his bird dogs would go because he loved hunting. His lifestyle didn't have the creep that it would like so many people have. And he ran that in business with exactly the same mentality. So he ran Walmart as though it was just a handful of small regional stores in Arkansas when it was nationwide. He had the
Mhm.
same kind of principles. And I mean, he built certain things to scale. He brought in people once he knew his limitations, and technology is a huge part of Walmart, which is another reason why it's so neat to our story here on the podcast, where it's both, rural communities and serving things and overseeing areas, but also just investing in technology and leveraging all those bits.
Mhm.
The amount that he could do with what he had was just amazing.
Agreed. Agreed. Now, my favorite of the 10 principles is number 10,
Hmm.
which is swim upstream. Tanner, what does he mean by swim upstream?
Go the other way. Ignore conventional wisdom. If everyone else is doing it one way, there's a good chance you'll find your niche by going the exact opposite direction. But prepare for a lot of folks waving you down and telling you you're headed the wrong way. I guess in all my years, what I heard more often than anything was a town of less than 50,000 population cannot support a discount store for very long.
So, as I can imagine, people who listen to us, Decentralized Opportunity, could imagine, Tanner and I study businesses. We study other businesses. We're fascinated by them. We love other businesses. And I right now am so fascinated at the concept of doing business in a non-business sense. I obsess and dream about the concept of how could I do business in a way that it's not done in America today. How can it's just like Sam Walton? How can I cut the red tape, the bureaucratic nonsense? How can I avoid all of this other BS that you have to deal with in the modern American business today? I am in such a deep dive in my head right now of why do we have to do business this way? Other than paying taxes and ensuring we're abiding by like employment rules and safety regulations, federal guidelines, I'll adhere to those things like that. People think you have to do business in a specific way, and that's just nonsense. That's not accurate. As long as you are not breaking the law, do business differently. And I loved that last bit of that quote, which was, um, if everyone else is doing it one way, there's a good chance you can find your niche by doing it in the opposite direction. Everyone asks, when they want to start a business, oh, I just can't think. Everyone's already doing it. I want to build XYZ product or service, but people are already doing it. This is it, guys. This is how you break free from that mold. Who cares if someone's already doing it? Do it in the opposite direction. Do it so incredibly different from your competition that people have to pay attention to you. There's power in that. Don't break the law, but there's power in it.
Absolutely. And there's culture and there's always counterculture.
Mm-hmm.
So the way things are happening today might be completely flipped on your head tomorrow. So being able to see the trends, being able to work things your way. And we've talked about it, throughout this whole episode, but Sam Walton was obsessed with merchandising and retailing and everything. And he was unrelenting in his amount of learning. And so he went through and studied every business that he possibly could. And he took all the little things that worked and he would try them out. And sometimes they didn't work, but he took all the best ideas and that he incorporated that within his efficient and lean business model. And everyone thought, here's this hokey guy from the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. He just doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know what he's doing. And he was completely underestimated. There was majority of his career until he was so far ahead of the competition by the time they noticed him that they could never catch up to him. God, goodness, again, that's the essence of so much of what we really love here and what we want to talk about on the podcast. Just there's so much that is overlooked and so much that is not understood that's happening with people in their own circumstances here in these smaller areas and not in big metro cities getting all the press and attention that can really grow into being something more powerful than that's being done in the light. So yeah,
Absolutely.
love it. So I'm just going to finish off with this one little quote here. It ties into all those. And again, it's just one of the reasons why I felt like it's such a good story to highlight on the podcast. Quote, I can tell you this, though. After a lifetime of swimming upstream, I am convinced that one of the real secrets of Walmart's phenomenal success has been that very tendency. Many of our best opportunities were created out of necessity. The thing that we were forced to learn and do was because we started out underfinanced and undercapitalized, and these small, remote communities contributed mightily to the way we've grown as a company. Had we capitalized, had we been the offshoot of some large corporation, we had never tried. It really resonated with me, this whole book. And there's so many pieces that I'm going to kind of try to incorporate in the way I do things now in business to hopefully do. And by gosh, why it's so motivating and makes you want to try to build something as well.
Don't get me started.
I know.
By the way, before we let everyone go, I just remember the name of the store for my story. I promised I would do it, and I don't want to break my promises. The store was Nordstrom, a high-end clothing store that returned a tire to an old lady one time. And then Sam Walton embodies those. And I never once thought I would sit here and talk about Sam Walton and Walmart on this podcast for 1 hour, Tanner, but I'm glad you made me do it because it genuinely is really good. Tell us the book one more time, and then we'll sign.
Sam Walton, Made in America, My Story. Absolutely incredible read. He wrote it literally at the end of his life to share with employees, with his family, but thankfully with all of us. And so we really got just such a deep dive into an incredible genius and someone who's inspired countless amounts of businesses that affect our lives every day, because there would not be an Amazon if there wasn't a Sam Walton building Walmart. And so highly recommend checking it out. We'd love to hear if you've what you got from the different rules, if you've read the book, what your big takeaways were, and if there's some different pieces that you could use in your own business too. So until then, we'll see you all next week. Bye.